What Marx dreamt is not simply a society with equality of income, but a society where there is no alienation. And a society without an alienation is not an easy thing to have. So, in a way, a spiritually evolved society, a spiritually evolved society. And Marx says, in that society, there is no conflict between essence and existence. There is no conflict between becoming, being. So these are not easy things to achieve. So this is what Marx said. On the end of evolution, which he called socialism. It is the true solution of the conflict between existence and essence, between freedom and necessity, between individual and species. It is the solution of the riddle of history and knows itself to be the solution. Consciousness at its highest, not only that it knows that it is, not only that it is good, but it knows that it is good, knows itself to be the solution. It is Erich Fromm who brings out more clearly the spiritual aspects of the goal of Marxism. Erich Fromm says that Marx is in fact deeply religious. Marx atheism is the most advanced form of rational mysticism, closer to Eckhart or Zen Buddhism. And he says that as a motto for his dissertation, Marx wrote this: not those are godless who have contempt for the gods of the masses. Okay, those who have contempt for the masses, gods of the masses are not godless, it seems. But those who attribute the opinions of the masses to the gods, those people are godless. So what is Marx then? So he is using the word godless in a negative way. If you think that the gods are like this, it means you are godless. So that shows Marx a higher conception of God. And the society Marx envisioned, Erich Fromm writes, that it is a spiritual society. For example, socialism, this is what Erich Fromm wrote. Socialism in its Marxist or other forms returned the idea of good society as the condition for the realization of man's spiritual needs. So a good society is the one where spiritual needs are met. And it was anti-authoritarian, both as far as the church, as far as the state are concerned. Hence, it aimed at this eventual disappearance of the state and at the establishment of a society composed of voluntarily cooperating individuals. So, society is made up of voluntarily cooperating individuals, and in that society, individuals' spiritual needs are met. Okay. And this is far away from much simpler goals of liberalism. Liberalism had to insist not only on separation from state and church, but had also to deny that it was the function of the state to help realize certain spiritual and moral values. These values were supposed to be entirely a matter for the individual. So liberalism aimed that spiritual values are for the individual, and state did not have. So essentially, liberalism did not target realization of any of these values. But Marxism targeted these values, and the attainment of these values would cause the disappearance of the state. Not that these values should come from the state, that the state, these values would come because of which the state would disappear. But how would these values come in the first place? As a result of mankind changing. And why would mankind change? As a result of change in the economic foundations of the society. Okay. So it is here we go back to what Marx said about materialism. Okay. What is the essential theory of Marxism here? So Marx believed socialism would come, which meant highly spiritual society would result in. But how would this come about? Marx believed this society comes not through ideas, education, religion. No. Not through education, ideas, religion, but through economic changes. Economic changes. Okay. One very important change Marx brought to philosophy advocated by Hegel is this. Hegel's theory is called idealism, which meant idea changes. This idea we have seen that spirit changes. So essentially it is our consciousness changes. There are many ways of looking at this. This idea changes, spirit changes, or consciousness changes. But to Marx, these changes are a result of changes in economy. Economy changes and other things change, which includes consciousness. So to Marx, there is economy and also technology. This constitutes the base of the society. And on that basis, other things exist. Politics, education, religion. This is called superstructure. So techno-economic base influences superstructure is what is called materialism, as opposed to Hegel's idealism. This is Hegel. This is Marx. So what is of importance here is that the source of change to Marx is not politics. Source of change is not state. Because the state and politics are part of the superstructure which is impacted by the base, that is economy. So it is economy that determines the consciousness, and it is not the consciousness that determines other things. So it is not that spirit is changing. It is not that. Anyway, Marx rejects the entire concept of spirit, but Marx accepts the idea of consciousness, but says that consciousness is changed by economic forces. So economy changes, and as economy changes, politics, state, religion, education, the nature of the state, and the consciousness itself changes. So if you want to create a better human being, Marx proposed change the economy. As we said, change of economy is not simply redistribution, but the end of alienation. Okay. Now let us see what Marx had to say on something like spirit. Okay. Marx rejects the idea of spirit. Hegel's philosophy of history presupposes an abstract or absolute spirit, which develops in such a way that mankind is only a mass which carries this spirit. Mankind carries the spirit, consciously or unconsciously. Hegel assumes that a speculative esoteric history precedes and underlies empirical history. The history of mankind is transformed into the history of abstract spirit of mankind, which transcends the real man. So to Hegel, spirit is going in this direction towards freedom, towards self-knowing, and mankind is carried along the spirit by the spirit. Okay. Marx rejects this. The history is made by men, not by the spirit. So the idea of spirit is not needed at all. Next, this is what Marx says about his conclusions. He says consciousness is determined by the economy. Hegel thought that the consciousness was changing in a particular direction, affecting other things. But Marx thought consciousness itself is affected by economy. This is the essence of materialism. How? The general result at which I arrived and which served as a guiding thread for my studies can be briefly stated as follows. In the social production of their life, men enter into definite relations that are indispensable and independent of their will. Relations of production, which correspond to a definite stage of development of their material productive forces. Material productive forces means technology. Technology leads to a particular kind of relations of production. So, essentially, technology. You can also say forces of production. Forces of production. These impact relations of production. Okay. It's about production. All this is called base. Okay. Next, the sum total of these relations of production constitutes the economic structure of society, the real foundation, okay, on which rises a legal and political superstructure, and to which correspond definite forms of social consciousness. The mode of production of material life conditions the social, political, and intellectual life processes in general. Okay. This base is also called mode of production. This mode of production affects all others. And so he says, it is not the consciousness of men that determine their social being, but on the contrary, their social being that determines their consciousness. Okay. But what is their social being? The foundation of which is economy. Okay. So, technology changes, relations of production changes, institutions change, and so consciousness itself changes. So this is how societies change. At certain stage in their development, the material productive forces of society come in conflict with the existing relations of production. So technology comes into conflict with existing relations of production or with the property relations within which they have been at work hitherto. From forms of development of the productive forces, these relations turn into their fetters. Then begins an epoch of social revolution. With the change of the economic foundations, the entire immense superstructure is more or less rapidly transformed. So, technology changes. This change leads to changes in relations of production. The old relations are outdated when the technology changes. So when these relations change, economic foundation changes. And all others change. Okay. And in this way, the world has gone through these changes. Asiatic mode of production. Okay, in broad outlines, Asiatic, ancient, feudal, and modern bourgeoisie modes of production can be designated as a progressive epoch in the economic formation of society. Asiatic, India's caste system is Asiatic production. Ancient society, Greek city-states. Ancient. Next, feudalism. Next, modern bourgeoisie. This is after Industrial Revolution. So this modern bourgeoisie production is capitalism. And Marx thinks all of them are progressive. So Marx agrees with the idea of progress that Hegel proposed, except that economic progress is leading to progress in consciousness. Economic progress is leading to consciousness progress. So this is Marx's idea. Okay. Then unlike Hegel, Marx here proposes certain very important things. He says the present mode of production is capitalism, and this is not the last. This is going to be replaced by communism. Okay. Essential argument of Marx was capitalism is going to lead to mass inequalities. Few capitalists are going to be there, but huge proletariat. They are going to lead a miserable life. Low wages. Okay. And very few capitalists, and then they are in such a bad position that they will revolt. And after they revolt, they establish what is called dictatorship of proletariat. And dictatorship of proletariat is an intermediary stage before they develop what is called communist society. And Marx thinks this comes as a result of inherent contradictions in capitalism. And this is inevitable. Okay, so this is what he thought. But we know these things did not happen at all. Okay. So they will develop communist society because of this. And in that society, human nature also is different. So this is how man is also changed. When they are, what they are coincides with their production, both with what they produce and with how they produce. The nature of individuals thus depends on the material conditions determining this production. So in a communist society, human nature also changes. Okay. So Marx society is a society where higher spiritual values are realized. And in such a society, the state, according to Marx, is not needed. Why is it so? Because state or politics is there only to serve a class. This is what Marx says. Political power or a state or law is to serve a class. In a classless society, these things won't exist. Political power, properly so called, is merely the organized power of one class for oppressing another. Marx thought of, because Marx thought of relations of production, so Marx thought of classes. In ancient society, masters and slaves. Classes. Masters and slaves in ancient society. This is one stage. In feudalism, landlords and serfs. This is another stage. In capitalism, capitalists and proletariat. This is one stage. So Marx thought technology changes, relations change, and society moves from one to, but this is not the end. This will move towards communism, where there are no such classes, no classes. And when there are no classes, because classes are creating a state, when there are no classes, there is no state. Okay. So it is class antagonism that is contributing to the state. When there is no class antagonism, there is no state. So state, according to Marx, will disappear. So Marx thought of state as a kind of an instrument of violence, or a kind of a wrong idea, a source of a wrong ideology by which one class dominates the other. So he says the executive of the modern state is but a committee for managing the common affairs of the whole bourgeoisie. When the bourgeoisie is gone, state also is gone. Addressing bourgeoisie, he said, your jurisprudence is but the will of your class made into a law for all. Your will is a law for all, whose essential character and direction are determined by the economic conditions of existence of your. So politics, state and law are directed to serve a class. In a classless society, state won't be there. Okay. And this is what Marx says. He's saying state comes from civil society. But in communism, civil society is changed in such a way that state is not needed. Since the state is the form in which the individuals of ruling class assert their common interests, and in which the whole civil society of an epoch is epitomized, it follows that in the formation of all communal institutions, the state acts as an intermediary, and that these institutions receive a political form. So in this, he is saying that civil society in which there are classes, state exists, and state is the intermediary. And then when the civil society changes, then state will not exist. The working class in the course of its development, classless society will not have a state. The working class in the course of its development will substitute for the old civil society. Old civil society was the society with classes, an association which will exclude classes and their antagonism. And there will be no more political power properly so called, since political power is precisely the official expression of antagonism in civil society. Civil society is going to change, class antagonism will disappear. Okay, so something else will come, that is an association without classes and their antagonism. And Engels writes in this book, Socialism, Utopian and Scientific, as soon as there is no longer any social class to be held in subjection, no longer any social class, nothing more remains to be repressed, and a special repressive force, state, is no longer necessary. The government of persons is replaced by the administration of things and by the conduct of process of production. The state is not abolished, but it dies out. It is also called withering away of the state. But remember, he is saying the government of persons is replaced by the administration of things and by the conduct of process of production. But maybe those things call for some people. But Engels, like Marx, is not calling such a thing as a state. Okay. So probably if some people are there for coordination purpose, Marx and Engels won't call them a state. But if they are there to apply law, repress, do propaganda, then that is state. It is such a state, according to Marx and Engels will not exist. So that is the ideology or dream of Marx.